Hello, this is Meister X, and I'm going to go over the Level 2 Academic Word of the Day for Week 6, Quarter 4. Let's take a look at your flashcard. Rigid has two syllables, and the emphasis or stress is on the first syllable, ri. So we say rigid. Go ahead and try to pronounce it. Rigid. Are you pronouncing the D at the end? Rigid. It is used only as an adjective, and we have three definitions for you to learn, but they're fairly similar. So let me go over each of them. The first one is very strict and difficult to change, and usually this describes a person. Do you know somebody who's very strict and doesn't want to change? Usually this person is has a disapproving demeanor or manner. Usually they don't approve of many things. They're kind of very strict about how they like to see things. So this usually pertains to rules and methods, etc. So maybe you want to do your vocabulary flashcards a different way. Maybe you don't want to do flashcards, you want to make lists. And your teacher might say, no, it has to be flashcards. So you can say your teacher is rigid, very strict and difficult to change. Okay? The second definition, actually let's go over the third one first. The third one describes things. Well, it could be people too. If you're stiff and difficult to move or bend. So if you're not flexible, then you are this definition. You're rigid in your physical characteristics. That means you can't move, or your posture is straight and no one can push you over. Or you can describe things like a piece of wood is usually rigid, stiff, and difficult to move or bend. Okay? So your sentence of today actually has both of these definitions, the first and the third. We have the rigid teacher insisted that the students, let's add that S there, use rigid index cards to make vocabulary flashcards. Okay, so here rigid describes a teacher that's unwilling to change, and here rigid describes the index cards which are stiff and not flexible and difficult to bend. Okay. Then we have a nice visual here of your rigid flashcards, and our rigid, you can see him, he's standing up very straight too, but unwilling to change, very strict. Whoops. Your other definition, the second one, is just not willing to change their ideas or behavior. Okay, so it's similar to the first one, but it's not strict. Okay, it's just not willing to change. But you're not disapproving of someone. The first one has kind of a parental connotation or an authority figure. The second one can be anybody, including yourself. So if you don't want to make flashcards and you insist on making sentences, then you can be called rigid too. So we have a good sentence here. The rigid student wanted to continue making vocabulary lists instead of flashcards. So this student is unwilling to change. They're so used to making vocabulary lists instead of the superior method of making flashcards and using those to study. Okay, we have, sorry about that, technical difficulties. All right, we have two familiar words for you. One is rigidity. Say rigidity. That's the noun. So you can say the rigidity of the teacher meant that no one could make vocabulary lists. They had to make flashcards. Or you can say the rigidity of the index cards meant that I could not bend them to put them in a small box. If you do something in a rigid manner, then you are doing something rigidly. And so that's the adverb form. So you can say, oh, the man stood up rigidly. It means he stood up very straight and no one could push him over. Very difficult to bend. Okay? You have several synonyms depending on each several synonyms depending on each definition. So for the first one, we have strict and stern. For the second one, we have adamant and stubborn. And for the third definition, we just simply have stiff. Your antonyms are flexible or pliant. And these antonyms go with any definition. They're the opposite of any of those three. So that is your academic word of the day. Go ahead and write an original sentence using rigid as a verb. No, sorry, as an adjective. You can use any of the three definitions. Be sure to include an illustration and make sure the sentence is about you. All right, happy studying.